comes out of that little drip that's out there next to it. So what did I do? I added a piece of pipe that comes out of there and goes down to a flower bed that's about 20 feet away. I never have to water that flower bed in the summer months because just the condensate from the air conditioner provides all of the water that it needs. A friend of mine that's on the Cow Creek board up in Kendall County, that's his dog's drinking water. He said he can put out a tub of water right here, and then he brought his condensate line up and then put the dog's other bucket right underneath it. He said the dog won't touch well water or won't touch city water, either one. The dog goes over and drinks that condensate water out of the air conditioner because it's just good, clean, basically distilled water. But you can do great things, you know, with that water. And again, I guess maybe some of y'all have sizable businesses. You'll be amazed at the amount of condensate. They figured up at the New Berney High School that the amount of condensate that their air conditioning system produces, if that water were run through a UV filter or something to be sure it was bacteria free, would provide all the drinking water for the high school, all the water for the bathrooms, plus enough water for the showers. It's just amazing how much water. Now in the wintertime, obviously you're going to have to find a different water source. But in fact, I go to the groundwater district meetings just because I'm very interested in water and water conservation. And there were some folks up there that felt like they needed to keep the water flowing. They've got a little, not necessarily waterfall feature, but kind of a cascading water feature. And under our drought plan up there, once we get to a certain stage, you can no longer run, you know, the anything that moves the water from a higher point to a lower point up there. And these people were saying, but we need to keep our fish alive, and got the directors of the Cow Creek to agree to let them do this if they would start refilling their ponds strictly from the condensate from their air conditioner. Solve everybody's problems. No longer having to use groundwater to refill that, and their air conditioning system produces more condensate than their feature was losing through evaporation. So everybody's happy now. We're not using groundwater, but we're able to operate the water feature. They're able to keep their fish alive, and they have a beautiful system. Of course, their neighbors keep turning them in and saying they're operating outside the drought rules, and they keep saying, I told them they need to put a sign up that said, this facility is not using groundwater or whatever. But that condensate water is one of the most wasted resources that we have, and if you're one of these people that loves to keep your house a frigid temperature in the summer months, trap and see how much water is coming out of your air conditioning system and find a place to use it. It does lead to a little bit of a problem sometimes. Houses that stay really cool can create such a wet spot, if you will have it, outside by the air conditioner, that there are a lot of things that you can't grow there because it literally stays just spongy wet. Well, that's another problem that's really fairly easy to solve if you know what plants to use. And there are a lot of plants out there, beautiful plants, that really don't mind having an excessive amount of water. If you're looking for a big shrub, everybody know what loquat is? I mean, you're looking for something that gets really big. It's amazing how much water that plant will not only tolerate, but how much water it will like. And again, I'll tell you a personal story about how I learned that fact. My aunt and uncle up in Dallas built a new home on pier and beam, and among the landscaping they planted a loquat out on the front corner of the house. That would have been, what, the southwest corner of the house. And I have never seen a plant grow that quickly. I've never seen a loquat that got so big so quickly and stayed so healthy. 10, 12 years later, they had a plumber out at their house getting down underneath to look at some kind of problem they had. And he came back up and said to my aunt, said, lady, did you know that no one ever hooked up your shower to the drain line? And so for all these years, that shower had just been dumping the water on the ground underneath the house. And guess what? It was right at that front corner of the house. And that loquat inside the, you know, the outer grade beam or whatever was just almost standing in water, and when they hooked it up properly, that plant died back to half of its usual size. So if you've got a wet spot and you're having trouble getting things to grow and you want something big, plant a loquat. If you want flowers, there are a number of perennials that absolutely love having fairly wet feet. Cannas are one if you have a sunny area. There's a plant called Physostygia, or obedient plant. This plant grows almost as well, it can grow as a bog plant, and it's just a gorgeous. There's a spring blooming and a fall blooming. One of them's lavender, the other one's white. An obedient plant is a neat plant. I wish we had some in bloom. It's just a little early. Anybody, how many of y'all have grown obedient plant? Anybody ever grown obedient plant? Puts up a spike, and then it has, 2-3 dozen flowers up and down this spike. But the flowers, the way they grow, is actually like a little hinge. And if the flower is pointing out this way, you can reach over with your finger and push the flower around this way and it'll stay. You push it back this way and it'll stay. That's where the name obedient plant comes from. It's a whole lot easier to remember than Physostygia. But it's a beautiful plant to plant in a bog area like that. There is a plant called Lythrum, L-Y-T-H-R-U-M. The most popularly grown form is called Morden's Pink, and this plant loves to grow in moist soil. It loves to grow in moist soil so much that several states have banned planting it because it's gotten into waterways and things, and it's not as bad as the water hyacinth, but it absolutely loves a wet spot to grow. Here it's not that much of a problem. We don't have the sort of waterways that it can be a problem in. But again, if you've got a really moist spot out there where your air conditioner drips out, you don't have to just put up with a mud hole back there. You can have beautiful things. You can have green things like your umbrella grass. I picked up some umbrella grass from one of the growers yesterday, and he wanted the big kind that gets like this tall. There's also a dwarf form that is green except in the very coldest months of the winter, and just a beautiful little plant to grow. The old-fashioned papyrus that paper was made from 3,000 years ago. It's a bog plant. Now the standard papyrus, it's going to freeze back in the winter. The little dwarf papyrus, which is just gorgeous, will be evergreen in all except the coldest winters. So if you've got a spot out in the yard, and I realize it's hard talking about places that stay too wet the past 18 months because we've been so desperately dry, but low spots in places like where the air conditioning system empties out, don't just put up with a mud hole out there. Plant some of these things and you can have anything from giant shrubs to small blooming plants. And one thing that I love to plant right around the condenser on an air conditioning system is mint. I hear all the time from people about fire ants getting into the electrical contactors. Fire ants, I mean, they're a nuisance as far as biting us, but they can be just devastating. They get into all kinds of motors and electrical things like that. What it is about the flow of electricity that attracts them, I have no idea. But they will short out, they will absolutely destroy, to the tune usually of several $100s, sometimes the different parts of your air conditioning system. And yeah, I think a few people have had that happen. Plant some mint. I don't know why it is, but fire ants hate mint, either spearmint or peppermint. It's a beautiful plant to plant, and it doesn't mind the wet soil at all. Just plant some of that out around the base of your air conditioner pad, and you'll never have fire ants in the area. Plus, you've got a ready source of peppermint for your mojitos, or spearmint, spearmint for your mojitos, or peppermint for your tea, or whatever else. And years ago, when I worked with Alton Grimm up in Bernie, we had just a big area of peppermint that grew back toward the back of the nursery, and it was one of those places that we drove that electric cart back and forth all the time, hauling plants on it. And every time you went through the area, it smelled like a peppermint factory for 15 minutes afterwards, which was very, very pleasant. And it actually makes pretty good ground cover. I'm sorry, more people don't use it as a good ground cover in shade or morning sun. So, moving from water features into areas that are wet, there's another problem that's pretty easily solved. But by all means, this summer especially, and one rain is not a drought break. We're still in a pretty serious drought. If we stay dry, by all means, you'll amaze yourself sometime. Put a bucket underneath that condensate drip and see how much water it produces. And like I say, I've got a flower bed that's, as long as this little section is right here, full of plumbago and thryallis and coral honeysuckle and all sorts of pretty things. And I never have to water it anymore because I just diverted the condensate line for my air conditioner, which doesn't run all that much, but it produces all the water that I ever need for that flower bed. And in these dry times, it's been by far the prettiest of my perennial beds around the house because we just can't water very much.
How to do that? You use like a soaker hose and PVC, or?
I just use a piece of PVC with several holes drilled in it.
Okay.
It's pretty low tech, but it's hidden underneath the plants and you can't see it, and it works very well. I guess you could use a soaker hose, no reason not to, and you're not going to have the calcium build up. It's I don't know, it's just good free water as far as I'm concerned, and how you distribute it, you can do it almost any way you like. Other problems, especially if you have ash trees or even oak trees, sometimes those roots are so thick